Good morning, everyone. And to Mother's Day, you mothers out there, happy Mother's Day to you. I'm a son who had a mother, and actually I'm a son who had a grandmother who reared me in the faith. I was influenced by many people who were not my biological mom, but were ladies in my life who taught me that Jesus loved me and that I should love him back. So if you're in that process, whether you have biological children or you have spiritual children, if you think that's a mistake, you read Titus chapter 2, it's in there. You may not have biological children, but if you have people you're influencing, they are your children in the faith, and if you're doing that, God bless you. In fact, I asked Michael if I could do this, and he said I could, so if it doesn't work, you blame him. But can I pray for you, ladies? Father, I thank you for the ladies in this room and the ladies in my life, both here on earth and now in heaven, who reminded me, who taught me from a very young age that I was loved by Jesus. And in the process that the ladies in this room do that, would you bless them even more than they realize, and would you bring about much fruit in their life so that others may taste and know that you are God and that you're a good God. Thank you for their presence in this room. Thank you for their presence in our life. We have been blessed by them. And now, Father, may you be honored in all that we do here. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. So happy Mother's Day to those of you who are in that frame of reference. And some of you know that I am Michael's father. Michael was up here doing the communion meditation. And what was interesting is the last time I preached, some people came up and said, you know, as soon as you opened your mouth, we knew that you two were related. Now, I take that as a pretty high compliment because Michael's one of my favorite preachers. I figure if I can get close to what he does, I'll be okay. But I want you to know we have similarities outside just the way we talk. I am frequently uptight about being misunderstood. Some of you might have known that about Michael. Michael works very hard to be very clear because he learned from his father, who has a tendency to say things and have them come out of his mouth in a way he did not intend. In fact, it's Mother's Day. My mom will probably be watching this sermon later in the week. Hi, Mom. My mom bought me a shirt when I was a teenager to drive home the fact that I must think before I speak. It was an orange shirt that looked like something you'd wear out if you were working in construction zones. And it said, no lie, be sure brain is in gear before engaging mouth. It's a true statement. And I wore this shirt. I thought it was funny. Others kind of got the point working towards me. But I want you to know, I'm not the only one who's afraid of being mistaken when they speak or when they assume things about life. In fact, even the professionals make mistakes. They intend one thing and it comes out another. For example, when Coca-Cola was first marketed in the nation of China in 1920, instead of translating the word, they actually just took the phonetic experience and put the words Kikukila. Okay, so they just took the phonetic words, which translated meant nothing to the Chinese people. In fact, translated Kukakila means female horse stuffed with wax. They couldn't figure out why no one was buying the soft drink. It was quickly revised to be translated happiness in the mouth. Or American Motors one time had an automobile named the Matador. Sounds really impressive, right? But it had a very low sales reality in Hispanic-speaking countries in the Caribbean. Because Matador translated means killer. And if you've been to Puerto Rico, you know that the roads there can be very hazardous, especially in the mountain ranges. They had to rename the car because what they had intended was misunderstood. Now, it's common to be misunderstood. It happens to me frequently, and sometimes it can be funny. But it's also common to misunderstand spiritual matters, and that can be much, much more serious. Such is the case with Luke chapter 9. Jesus makes this comment one time. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for me will save it. Now, it's easy to think we know what that passage means, and then still be sadly mistaken about the radical challenge it is to following Jesus. You see that lived out in the life of an individual we're going to look at today. Jesus carries on a conversation with a New Testament character who thought he knew what it meant to love God with his whole heart, only to discover there was some misunderstandings about the one whom Jesus had sent. You only read his name in 3 places in the Scriptures. It's only located in one gospel, in the Gospel of John, where we're going to be this morning. You see him referenced in John 3, John 7, and John 19, and probably you know his name because of the conversation he has in John 3, one of the most famous conversations in all of Scripture. He's a good guy. This guy named Nicodemus. You may know the name Nicodemus. He meets with Jesus at night, has a conversation, and he has some misunderstandings about the Messiah. But I want you to know, were Nicodemus in our presence today, if he were to come to our church today, he would immediately be well received. He'd be on the great guy list. He'd never cheat on his taxes. He'd never drive like a maniac. He'd never text a message in all capitalization. He'd always do it right. He'd have open arms to anyone who wanted to be his friend. His religious experience, friends, would be vast. He's an instant leader type, this guy, Nicodemus. He'd be involved in small groups. He would play in the worship band. He would be the senior minister's dream guy. And this gentleman, Nicodemus, Mr. Perfect, from a church's perspective, has a conversation with Jesus, and you know what Jesus says to him? Nicodemus, simply being a great guy, that's not enough. You're a nice person, Nicodemus. You're an honest person, Nicodemus. You're even a loyal person, Nicodemus. You are a good church person. But that alone won't get it. Because understand, Nicodemus, you have to have more than what, nice and honest and loyal, great qualities. But let's just face it, friends, there can be people who don't believe in Jesus can have those qualities. That might be good religion. Jesus wants strong relationship with his followers. The process of dying to oneself, taking up one's cross, following Jesus takes intentional, complete turning over of what I want to what Jesus wants. It means developing a relationship with Jesus rather than doing a few rituals. And friends, for Nicodemus, this change occurs in 3 phases. We're going to look at them today in each one of those passages. 3 phases. In some manner, some of the same phases we must go through as followers, as disciples of the Messiah. And let me raise them for you. The first phase that we see and can learn from Nicodemus is to enlarge our belief about the power of God. Now, if you want to, you can flip over to John chapter 3. Some of you may already be there. You're familiar probably with verses 16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. For the Son of Man did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that through him the world might be saved. You're probably familiar with that very famous passage. But there is a conversation that leads up to that statement. It's the conversation with Jesus that Nicodemus has. Here's how it begins. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a member of the Jewish ruling council. You might see it in other places called the Sanhedrin. He came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know you're a teacher who's come from God, for no one could perform the miraculous signs you're doing if God weren't with him. In reply, Jesus declared, I tell you the truth, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he's born again. Well, how can a man be born when he's old? Nicodemus asked. Surely he can't enter a second time into his mother's womb to be born. Jesus answered, I tell you the truth, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless he's born of water and spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but spirit gives birth to spirit. You should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again. The wind blows where it pleases. You hear its sound, but you can't tell where it comes from or where it's going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. How can this be? Nicodemus asked. You're Israel's teacher? Jesus said, and you don't understand these things? I tell you the truth, we speak of what we know and we testify to what we've seen, but still people do not accept our testimony. I have spoken to you of earthly things and you do not believe. How then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? Now I'm going to stop there. There's a conversation that continues about the sign of Moses being raised, and then of course Jesus makes the comment that God so loved the world that he gave his son. But even in the first verses that I just read to you, there's an important conversation that's at stake. We see that Nicodemus is ready to concede that Jesus is a good teacher and a contemporary miracle worker. Maybe what they would call in the first century, a prophet. Nicodemus is ready to say, you are a prophet. But he has trouble dealing with the theology that Jesus offers that's beyond the obvious. There's this conversation about water and spirit, and John the Baptist had been stating that someone was coming who would baptize with spirit and with fire. Maybe the issue that Nicodemus understands, maybe he understands water. He might get that, to be born of water and spirit. He might get water because the Jews would have had purification rites for at least, several generations. He gets being cleansed by water, but it's that spirit thing. That issue of the Spirit's a whole new issue. And Jesus must have known, because he focuses the conversation. The focus of the conversation gravitates to recognizing the ability of God to move beyond what one might expect. With Nicodemus, it was born again. The wind blows where it likes. It comes and goes. You don't know where it starts. You don't know where it ends. But you always know it's been there. How do you know, friends? How do we know where the wind has been? We see its effects. I mean, we live in Hurricane Alley. You can tell where the wind has been. It's the same thing with the Spirit. You might not know where it starts and you might not know where it ends, but you can always tell the impact of the Spirit by the difference that he makes. Now for Nicodemus, that didn't seem to fit his idea of God. He's a good man. He loves the law. But this idea of God being able to do something beyond what he had constructed, he had kind of created this box that God had to operate in, and to operate outside of what he thought was reality, that was a little too much. Now I want you to know, we learned that honestly. Nicodemus isn't the only person who has a tendency to put God in a box. I mean, I remember I've been in ministry now over 30 years. And my first ministry was a youth ministry, which I had some responsibility for children. So I would take care of our senior high and junior high, but every Sunday morning I would lead youth worship and do a youth lesson. And I would usually have kind of like open season on the youth songs, and there was one song that the 5th grade boys loved. They wanted to sing If I Had a Little White Box. Do you know the song? Let me sing it for you. Is it okay? Can I sing it for you? I remember the song because I had to lead it every single week. Here's how it goes. If I had a little white box to put my Jesus in, I'd take him out and share him with a friend. Isn't that nice? That's not why the 5th grade boys, thank you. That's not why the 5th grade boys like that. The 5th grade boys like that because of the second verse of this song. Here's how it goes. If I had a little black box to put the devil in, I'd take him out and smash his face and shove him back again. Thank you. Now you know why the 5th grade boys love that song. But I got to tell you, that's bad theology. I mean, we know that the evil one is not stuck in a black box. He roars around like a roaring lion, looking to devour all he can. And where did we ever think that God himself was stuck in a box? Where did we ever get the thought that Jesus could be contained in our simple ideas? You remember what he tells Solomon when he dedicates the temple? I'll put my name here on this building. I'll hang out in this building, but you realize, Solomon, the heavens cannot contain me. No trouble for many disciples. And the reason that dying to oneself is such a struggle is that it's easy to get caught up in the temptation to make God in our own image rather than we being made in his. If Jesus were to carry on a similar conversation with us, friends, what might he say? Might he say, Shane, just how big is your God? Or maybe, Shane, just how small is your God? What's beyond his capacity? At what point does he have to operate within your limited perspective, Shane? Is your God able to love the person that you deem as unlovable? Is your God able to build within you an act of service that you deem too great for your abilities or too below your station? Shane, what theological arguments are you so certain you've interpreted correctly that you could actually be limiting God? That's the first phase that Nicodemus has to go through as he evolves as a disciple. You see it in this first encounter. But if you read the rest of chapter 3, you realize the story goes unresolved. And it's unlike, this is interesting, the story of Nicodemus is interesting because in this story, it remains unsolved. There's no conclusion. And that is very unique to all the other stories in the chapters in the book of John. In almost every other encounter, there's a conclusion, except with this gentleman. It's open-ended. We really don't know how it finishes. Maybe that's because there's a second change, a second phase that Nicodemus has to go through. Maybe that we have to go through as we die to ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Jesus. Maybe that process is the same process Nicodemus has to work through. And that's the second thing we learn from him, is that is to allow Jesus to push us beyond our comfort zones. You see that in chapter 7, especially in verses 45 through 52. If you want to turn there real quick. And I say comfort zones because that's something I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with comfort zones in my car, in my rooms at home, in my personal space. There's not too much danger. There's not too much discomfort. Nicodemus seems to live with the same reality in John 7. This encounter actually takes place in the midst of a community-wide discussion that begins really at the very beginning of John 7. It's a conversation about whether Jesus is the prophet. Not a prophet like Nicodemus was talking, friends. We're talking the prophet. Deuteronomy chapter 18 prophet. The one sent from God just like Moses. There's a debate that's raging among the religious types. The hypocritical religious leaders, not all the religious leaders in Jesus' day were hypocrites, but the hypocritical religious leaders are convinced that Jesus could not be the prophet because the conversation, as you discover, revolves around the fact that the Messiah doesn't come from Galilee, he comes from Bethlehem. And they make this statement as you come up to John chapter 7, verses 45 through 52, that anyone thinking otherwise is unlearned and cursed. I mean, if you can't attack the message, attack the messengers. And it's at the end of this conversation in verses 45 through 52 that Nicodemus makes this very interesting statement. Does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he's doing? Now notice that Nicodemus, quite unexpectedly, communicates a truth that's contained in the Torah, the Jewish instruction of the law. If someone is doing something, he deserves a fair hearing to find out what he's up to. Does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he's doing? Now, I would not call that a ringing endorsement. That's not strong endorsement for Jesus. I mean, the temple guards have already come back to say that Jesus speaks like no one we've ever heard before. Even the temple guards will acknowledge that. But at least Nicodemus is willing to abide by the law. In fact, Nicodemus seems convinced that if Jesus can just get a fair hearing, those who are riding the fence would be convinced. And in response, you see it on the screen. What? Are you also from Galilee? Maybe it reads up there, are you from Galilee too? Now, friends, that's not a compliment. That is a loaded question from the very beginning. What, are you from Galilee? That's like saying to someone from Florida, are you from Florida State? And maybe if you're from Alabama, are you from Auburn? Or if you're from my neighborhood, I grew up in the great state of Missouri. And we can live with just about anyone except someone from Kansas. I mean, you realize we're one of the only states that had a war, not like the Civil War, but we had a war fought over a borderline, the border war. In fact, when Missouri Tigers and Kansas Jayhawks play football and basketball, the sportscasters will call it the border war. They don't do it as much anyhow because of the realignments with the conferences, but in the sports world, if you lived in Kansas or Missouri, you knew what the border war was all about. It was your state against that state. I grew up about a half an hour, 45 minutes from the University of Missouri. I bleed black and gold, and I can't stand Jayhawks. Of course, then I went to college and met my wife. Yes, friends, she hails from Southwest Kansas. You know, about 20 miles from the end of the world. That's where she lived. And when they play basketball, there's a friendly rivalry. Someone has to be right, someone has to be wrong. I want you to know, friends, I took the best thing in Kansas and moved her out. I feel a calling. Are you from Kansas? Are you from Galilee? And notice that Nicodemus says nothing in response. Why is there no response? Was Nicodemus embarrassed? Did he feel ganged up on? I mean, I know what it's like to be in my comfort zone. I avoid being pushed to the envelope too far. I just wonder how far Nicodemus was pushed out of his comfort zone in this moment. If he was embarrassed, does he secretly hope that he can operate incognito like Joseph of Arimathea does? Can he have his faith without having to operate too far out of the mainstream? Does he hope to adapt his faith to his lifestyle rather than adapting his lifestyle to his faith? I mean, how often have we been there? How often have I pursued a faith consistent with my comfort zone rather than a faith that is consistent with Christ? How many times have I agreed to take up my cross and follow Jesus only to forget there are very few comfort zones on a cross? Maybe that's not it at all. I mean, who knows? Maybe Nicodemus falls silent because he believed that arguing with the hypocritical leaders was useless. I mean, ever been in a discussion where you know early on how the conversation is going to end? You know it's going to end in a disagreement. Ever believe the situation was hopeless and that simply leads you to say, I'll shut up and let them believe what they want to believe. They can go on believing they're right if they want. I wonder if Nicodemus just thought to himself, it's better just to keep silent and not push people. You know, we operate in a culture, friends, that teaches us it's better to keep silent than to speak discomforting truth. Even if the silence leaves me in my comfort zone and others in darkness. Why no response? I don't know. Scripture doesn't say. I suppose it's possible that any of the previously stated ideas could be true. I like to think that Nicodemus is growing, that the wind of change, the power of the Spirit, is blowing the musty smell of religious observance. I like to think that the Spirit's blowing that smell out of his life and blowing into his life the whole idea of relationship. I like to think that something alive is occurring in the life of Nicodemus. But again, the story in John 7 goes unresolved. We don't know what happened. And maybe we don't know what happened because John wants us to wait for the final phase of the relationship building with Christ. He wants us to see it. The relationship building that moves Nicodemus from misunderstanding to mission driven. Maybe John, maybe the Messiah, if Nicodemus were in our midst as a church attender, he might say, look, assert to Jesus that you will lay everything on the line for him. You see that example in John chapter 19, verses 38 through 42. There are those, we appreciate this, there are those who will lay it all on the line for something they believe in. There are folks who have served in the military and they believe in the call of the nation and they will have laid it all on the line for that calling. But there are people who for something a lot less noble than that will lay it all on the line. In May 2005, those of you who are Hollywood movie types, you can appreciate this. The third installment of the Star Wars trilogy, okay? We're talking like the Revenge of the Sith, okay? So it was like number 6 released, but number 3 in the story. In May 2005, Hollywood released the Revenge of the Sith. And for those who are Star Wars fans, I mean, these people are serious. They'll lay it on the line. There's a story told that in one part of our country, when they announced the release date, 46 days before the movie was released at midnight, they started camping out on a sidewalk in the city so they could be the first ones to watch the release. Do you believe it? You can imagine the shock when they realized the day before it was shown to be released, the movie was not being shown at that theater. 46 days. There are people who are serious and they'll lay it all on the line for what they want. Jesus wants his followers to lay it on the line, to go all in. And I would suggest to you that's exactly what you see with Nicodemus. Let me read for you. Later, this is in chapter 19, verse 38. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now, Joseph, I mentioned him just a few moments ago, was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jews. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. That's in John 3. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped him with spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with the Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden was a new tomb with whom no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Now, I would suggest to you, friends, the feel of this encounter with Jesus, between Nicodemus and Jesus, this encounter is much different. No longer do the opinions of the religious leaders matter. Opinions have turned to action. And they've killed off the rebel Messiah. Everything's different now. The disciples are on the run. The women have lost hope. The Romans have executed just another Jewish rebel. Everything is different except the wind that seems to be blowing in the life of this man, Nicodemus. Because all the reactions you might expect to read about at the crucifixion, it's the reaction of Nicodemus that to me is one of the most intriguing. I mean, I'll admit, I'm surprised by the disciples for getting the tips off of Jesus, I'll raise from the dead. I'm surprised they forgot that. I'm somewhat surprised by Pilate when he washes his hands and lets the combative Jewish leaders push him around. I'm surprised by that. But the actions of Nicodemus in this moment, they stun me. I'll tell you why. Nicodemus takes responsibility for the body of Jesus. You get it, right? You see it. He's a Jew. Nicodemus. He's a Jew. He's a religious Jew, a Pharisee. This is Passover, the day of preparation. And Jesus is dead. According to Jewish law, when he touches the body of Jesus, he becomes unclean. He cannot celebrate the one festival in all of Judaism that it was believed every good Jew would do whatever it takes to participate. And now for Nicodemus, that's not going to happen. He has denied himself, he's taken up his cross, and he's decided he's going to follow Christ. And when you read this passage, the issue is unresolved. Not with Nicodemus. He's beyond asking, how big is my God? He's beyond deciding where are the comfort zones. In this story, in this place, for Nicodemus, it's the place of no return. It's put up or shut up for Nicodemus. It's time for a choice, and without hesitation, he puts up. No, friends, his story's decided, but it's still unresolved because I'm talking about our story. You see, we face the same challenge, the same moment of decision. We face a choice. We have to decide whether we turn our back on what we want and lay it down at the feet of Jesus, that we go all in and we do what he wants. We decide where we'll tell Jesus, I'll come this far and no further. And I'll leave you with this thought, and then we're going to pray. Jesus does not want to be number one in your life. He wants your allegiance to function as though he's the only one in your life. Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will take care of itself. So do you have a list of priorities at which Jesus might even be near the top, or do you have one priority? And he is it. Let's pray.